I feel really lucky to be giving the Devar for Yitro, which is, as they say, a very rich text. I read some discussions that call it a hinge text in the Jewish story. The people of Israel have left Egypt and they are waiting on the cusp of receiving the Ten Commandments, which happens in the second half of the Parsha. But we haven't really begun to wander or make our way to Israel yet. A hinge text is really perfect for me because I'm at my own juncture of reflection right now. And I imagine that many of you are also in a deep state of reflection given what has been happening in our own country in the last few weeks. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit, hopefully not too much, but hopefully say a few things that are helpful. As you may have heard over the last few weeks in the announcements, I'm being honored later today for being very involved in starting and serving on the board of Carolina Jews for Justice for the last 12 or 13 years, and just stepping down from the board after a long service. Carolina Jews for Justice, for folks who don't know, is a progressive statewide North Carolina group that focuses on domestic issues, not on Israel, but on many issues that people care about around state and local politics and sometimes even American politics, and has really grown out of a group effort of some of us who felt like there was something needed in the state that was missing that we built together. I've also recently taken on a new job, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how Carolina Jews for Justice related to different jobs I've done during that period. I want to connect some lessons from the Parsha that really resonated with me and that experience with Carolina Jews for Justice, as well as a second experience with North Carolina Leadership Forum that Leslie Winter and I have done together. And I'm going to focus on the first half of the Parsha, with apologies to those of you who might have wanted to hear something about the Ten Commandments. I'm not going to talk about them. Yitro opens with Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, bringing Moses' wife and sons to him after the Israelites have left Egypt. The wife and sons quickly go off and join the crowd, and Moses and Yitro sit down so Moses can tell Yitro about how God took the Jews out of Egypt. It's a curiosity that the Parsha is named after Yitro, who was a Midian priest. He was not Jewish, and he believed in polytheism. But he plays a really critical role in the history of the Jewish people and in this Parsha. He's a third-party observer who helps Moses and ultimately the people Israel see something about themselves and their connection to God and their community. In hearing the story of the people living Israel, Yitro himself is very impressed and goes through his own change. He says, "Now I know that God is greater than all the other gods," and makes his own sacrificial offering in respect. What happens next is even more fascinating. After their conversation, Yitro observes as Moses sits all day as a magistrate judge and decides the disputes of various people that come before him. Yitro thinks this is kind of weird and gets concerned and stops Moses and says, "What are you doing?" Moses says, "Well, all day long, people come to me with questions about what God thinks they should do, and I sit and resolve their disputes." Yitro responds, "What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will wear yourselves out. This work is too heavy. You cannot handle it alone. Listen to me. I'll give you advice. May God be with you. Select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men. Appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at times, but bring difficult cases to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter because they'll share it with you. If you do this and God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain. And so too will these people reach their place in peace." So what Yitro is saying to Moses is, why are you acting alone while the people just stand around all day? Rachel Farbiar's attorney practicing in human and civil rights interprets this passage to show Yitro's critique is not just about how Moses is wearing himself out, but a concern about the nation's well-being for this structure where Moses decides everything. She says, unless justice is more accessible, The people themselves will be worn out by the waiting. But if Moses appoints judges, you'll be able to stand and the people will come to their place in peace. Yes, she says, this is a bureaucratic, kind of tedious solution, but spreading out responsibility through process and structure is critical to success. The law's processes, its institutional infrastructure, the fair and efficient functioning of a human system so earthly in its unremarkable mundanity is the necessary prerequisite to divine revelation. In this case, she's talking about judicial system that administers decisions according to divine law. But it really struck me as someone involved with starting an advocacy and justice organization as a core principle of how we operated. I came to the work because I didn't want to be alone in raising my voice for what I cared about. I wanted to join with other people who had similar concerns and form a network who could contribute their skills and talents to working collectively for a more just society. The structure of community organizing is not really that different than the structure that's proposed here for the judiciary. One person seeks out another, we build a common bond, and then we seek to engage a few more people. And we build leadership structures that engage as many people as possible. We do this because there's power in community and engaging many leaders and many voices. The building of structure, the one-to-one conversations, the decision to take on a leadership role, chapters, a structure, participants are actively doing the work of engaging in questions of what's fair and what's just. Just a couple of examples of things I learned. We had an instance where a teen working towards their bar mitzvah decided for their mitzvah project to do something supporting teacher pay. And CJJ actually took him to the legislature with a small group and met with legislators. And it really, to watch legislators interact with a 12-year-old, to watch then state legislator Valerie Fouché ask him what his Torah portion was, changed my view of what it was like to interact with legislators. I had the opportunity many, many years ago to organize the rabbis when they wanted to speak up on LGBTQ rights. And they held a press event in the legislature where they sang Hallel and spoke. And they couldn't have organized that themselves, but it was an extraordinary experience to be in the assembly with them and hear them sing like that. And I hadn't thought of it till today, but I sat at a table with Lila Singer and did get out the vote work sometime in the last 10 years. So she had to have been 85, 90, asking people to sign up to vote. And again, like that's so inspiring. It's much better than doing this work alone. Rabbi Ayalon observes in Yitro, the people of Israel decide to accept a human justice system, one in which justice is not administered by Moses or by God, but by judges who have never had direct contact with God. The people accept the Ten Commandments and the laws handed down by God, but they administer fairness and justice themselves without divine day-to-day involvement. How do they do this and do it well? If Yitro's suggestion of structure and expansion of responsibility makes it possible for Moses and the delegated judges to spend more time with each case, one of the things that accomplishes is an ability to listen more closely and reach judgment less quickly. This is essential. The Parsha opens up with listening, and listening is a constant theme. Yitro heard all that God had done. A Midian priest who isn't even part of the people of Israel listens to something far beyond himself and changes his beliefs, maybe not completely, but significantly in reaction. He then observes Moses and says, "Listen to me, I'm going to give you advice." And Moses, who's literally doing what he thinks God wants him to do, listens to his father-in-law and says, "Oh, this is a good idea," and changes his behavior. He has more time to listen for each case, and his appointed judges can listen longer as well. So I started off with Carolina Jews for Justice when I was working in a pretty focused advocacy position. And I had gotten really frustrated that we were no longer having success, and I didn't understand why we were so stuck. And I moved over to working with Leslie Winner and a program called the North Carolina Leadership Forum. The Leadership Forum is very countercultural right now. The concept is that we bring together a group of leaders, half liberal, half conservative, from all across the state, and engage in discussions about why we disagree on policy. A key innovation is to slow down the participants. They want to move quickly to solve problems, but we say that before you can talk about solutions, you have to get to know each other. You have to build relationships and trust, understand what's behind their concerns and their values. And then maybe, after you've done all that listening and talking, you might get to solutions. But you should still keep talking about why you disagree. There are a lot of times that I'm really skeptical and I conclude I really still disagree with this person. But the deep listening I've observed and participated in has really been transformative. I've learned that people I often start off thinking of as opponents really care about the same issue and have a completely different approach to what they want to do about it. As an example, I've learned a lot about the differences of what we experience here in Durham, which is a pretty thriving, growing city, and the rural parts of North Carolina, where people are really worried about job loss. People drive an hour to get to a doctor. And that really changes what it is they're looking for from their policymakers compared to what I think is urgent. And I've built genuine relationships based on shared values with people that hold deeply different political perspectives, but still call me to check on how I'm doing or ask me what I think about an important issue. In a completely different context, talking about working with and for incarcerated people, in his book, Just Mercy, Bryan Stevenson emphasizes the importance of proximity, which I've come to think of as a close cousin to listening, as a way of understanding humanity. Proximity to the condemned and incarcerated made the question of each person's humanity that I interacted with more urgent and meaningful, including my own, says Bryan Stevenson. He talks about how we allow fear, anger, and distance to shape the way we treat the most vulnerable among us. At the end of his book, he says, I do advocacy because I too am broken, not just the people I serve. We are all broken by something. We have all hurt someone, and we have all been hurt. We share the condition of brokenness, even if our brokenness is not equivalent. Our shared brokenness connects us. This lesson of proximity and its relationship to listening is key. Only when Moses cuts back, slows down, reduces how many cases he listens to each day, and spends more time with the tough issues, only when he and the other judges get more proximate to their own community members can they appropriate and administer justice. There's some debate about the order of the Parsha. We read the story of Yitro and Moses' conversation and the design of the judiciary first. Then we transition to the extraordinary description of receiving the 10 Commandments of Sinai full of fire and smoke. Some of the discussions of the Parsha I read in preparation for today say, of course, it was necessary. First, we had to establish a judiciary, then we were ready to receive the 10 Commandments. Rashi takes a different approach. He says it's impossible. We had to have received the 10 Commandments first. What on earth was the judiciary administering if not the 10 Commandments that had been received? He says we read this section because the important details, the importance of an outsider observing and offering good counsel that benefits the people of Israel, the discernment that Yitro shows in taking Moses seriously and believing in the importance of God, even though he worships other gods, and the action of Moses and the people of Israel to listen and to build a system of justice so they can administer their own community and take responsibility for divine law. It has been a challenging several weeks. It's hard to think right now about this idea of listening closely, particularly to people you disagree with. It's hard to think about building community and slowing down before you leap to judgment. Regardless of your politics, I think every day of the news the last several weeks has made you think about what you think about authority and leadership, what is the role of judges, and how do we govern ourselves, and what is justice. I struggle with this every day when I think about what I should think or what I should do, and I really don't have a prescription for us all. But I think there's some core principles in Yitro that are very helpful. We are each responsible for listening to not just to people we agree with, but for listening really hard to where people are coming from when we disagree, and to really challenge ourselves to think deeply about where other people are coming from. I don't mean you need to listen to people in positions of authority. I mean, we need to listen closely to each other. And especially in a tumultuous time like this, it's important to listen to people in our own local community and those around us, whether we agree or disagree. And second, we are each personally responsible for building these relationships and systems and processes that contribute to our beloved community. Our community functions better when we each participate and when we work together to reflect the divinity in all of us. Shabbat Shalom.